over the heads of the Iranians. But it's not a sword I want to use. I want to see this country be a leader in the world. And if you're a leader, it means you've got vision, you've got courage, and you can talk to people. We could do all that. So I want to share that with you because I need your support. I need your support to head off what I think could be a terrible tragedy. I was in New York City for dinner on Friday night with, or Monday night with Maria Bartiromo after I got back from Saudi Arabia. And we had all these big business people sitting around. And one thing everybody agrees on, the future is all about China. If your children are learning a second language, take Chinese. If you're going on a tour somewhere, go to China. If you're looking for investments that are going to grow, invest in China. Everybody agrees it's about China. Right now, for the financial community in New York, we all have agencies representing us in China. We're bringing on Chinese native speakers. It won't be long before our headquarters will be moved over to Shanghai and will be part of Chinese banks or something. I mean, this is happening extraordinarily fast. And it threatens America's freedom of action in the world, it threatens America's values, and it threatens the economic security of ordinary Americans. And in the meantime, this crazy administration is so blind and so determined to go to war with Iran that it's missing the real challenge to our national security in a larger sense, which is how do we cope with a Chinese economic juggernaut. So the big picture is we got to head off a war with Iraq, work on our education, healthcare, business environment, strengthen unions, and all the things Carol says she's already working on down there, so America can compete globally, economically, and produce things. When I ran last time, I went through Berlin, and a guy told me in that paper mill that was about to close, he said, General, he says, I don't see how America can survive if we don't produce anything. And I think he's right. And that's up to us. So let's head off the war in Iran. Let's get focused on what the real challenge is, which is America's place in the global marketplace and protecting our citizens from global unfair competition and a whole host of other issues that are associated with this. And let's keep Carol Shea Porter in Congress. Thank you. Does anybody? No, sorry. Are there any questions? Seriously. Susan.
Any chance that you might be announcing any time in the next
I haven't said I won't run. I just haven't said. But, you know, I'm very happy right now to be out here for Carol and for other people and to work these policy issues because I think we got some enormous challenges right now. You cannot, now look, I'm going to just tell you who I am if you didn't know who I am. You cannot pull the plug on Iraq, line up the troops on the highway and march them out of there. You may want to do it, you cannot do it and protect America's security in the region. You can't. You've got to do it under the cover of diplomacy. And right now there's no diplomacy going on. So, I mean, my prescription's the same it's been for 3 years. Talk to Iran's neighbors, work politically on the ground in Baghdad and put reinforcements into that, and then have a security element. And I would send a high-level team over there, and I'd do a Dayton-style peace negotiation like we did in the Balkans in reverse. There we went over there to put troops in to take a country apart. Here, we ought to be taking troops out to keep a country together. But it has to be diplomatically led, and that's what hasn't happened. So I'm interested in working the policy sides right now, Susan. Thank you. Katrina.
General, you said at the outset that Carol has that rare ability to frame issues in such a way that you can't disagree with her, and I think you share that quality with her, and thank you for your fantastic remarks. But I wanted to ask you, do you view this recent development with the Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice indicating that the U.S. will participate in this meeting hosted by Iraq that will include Syria and Iran, do you consider that to be a step in the right direction, or just sort of a window dressing so that the administration will be able to say, well, see, we did make an effort to talk to them. That's question number one. And question number two, could you clarify, you said at one point that you think we may need to continue to hold the sword over the head of the Iranians, but that you don't want to use that sword. Can you put a little flesh on those bones? I mean, do you think that we need to continue to do some of the things we're seeing, you know, ships being sent to the Persian Gulf and other, you know, exaggerated, if you will, rhetoric to sort of keep that pressure on? How would you handle those things?
Well, in the first case, I think it's great if the administration will participate in that regional dialogue. The message coming out of the administration is mixed, and I don't know if you saw the follow-up message, but they made it very clear they will not talk directly to Iran and Syria. So what are they going to do, sit at the table? I don't get it. Now, this is better than where they were in September. In September, at the last one of these meetings, the United States refused to attend. The Saudis invited them to come, the United States said no. Now at least the United States is going to sit there and say nothing. I don't have any high hopes for this. With respect to the military option, I think you have to have a strong military baseline. The world is still about power. But I think that military power is strongest if it's not used. I think once you use it, you diminish it. Unless you're going against a conventional army that you can whack and knock out of the field. Because I know from the Kosovo campaign, everybody had great expectations before the first bombs fell. The first night the bombs fell, everybody inside the command said, oh boy, we did it, we got those stealth fighters in, we got them back, everything's safe. Yeah, I went to work the next morning and you know what, the Serbs didn't surrender. And the next night, they didn't surrender. And the third night, the weather was bad and we had to scrub some of the targets. And the fourth night, we had an aircraft that got hit. So these campaigns of using military power, they always look seductive and powerful when you don't know anything about it. I guess it's like if you're not a lawyer and somebody does something to you, say, if you do that again, I'll sue, I'll sue. Or if you're not a doctor and you think, well, if anything happens to me, I'll just go to the doctor, he'll fix it. Well, the military is the same thing, and if you just say, I'll go to the military, they can't. They can't. So I'd put the aircraft carriers out there. And I don't have any issue with that. But look how much leverage we already have. We're the world's greatest economic power. We control the World Trade Organization. We control the G8. We control Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron. They control the best oil technology that the Iranians need. We control Iran's central banking system. We can shut down access, the ability to transfer funds out. We control all of their reserves that we confiscated under the Shah. We have a pistol to their heads, not only literally, but figuratively. And there's no reason why we can't talk to them. So what I always found in the Balkans, and I think this is true anywhere in the world, is if you want to kick someone in the shins, the best way to do it is to hold them by the collar. And if you won't see them face to face and talk to them, all of the rest of it doesn't work. We'll be much more effective in dealing with Iran if we just talk to them. We don't have to agree with them, we just have to talk to them. So I'm not for taking the military option off the table. I'm for putting a diplomatic option on the table. Ambassador, sir.
Sort of a follow-up to that. It's great to see you too, General Clark. Okay, so we're going to keep the military option on the table. At the table, we're going to put the diplomatic option on the table. But one of the things that you talked about, which has to do with the fact that all of our oil comes from the Middle East, really keeps us in a position where we may have a gun to their head, but they're the one that has the finger on the trigger, because they can pull the bullet out of the gun at any moment just by denying us that oil that we need so desperately. So I'm curious, you're talking to all the big mucky-mucks all around the country about what's happening with regard to our ability to defend the country. What about our energy declaration of independence? How do we deal with our energy situation so that if, in fact, things get to the worst case, we aren't totally controlled by the fact that we are addicted to the oil of the Middle East?
think it's a really important question, and I'm glad you asked it. First of all, we have a near-term problem, because in the near term, we're consuming 19 or so million barrels of oil a day, and we're producing on the order of 6, and it's going down. So we're importing 11 or 12 million barrels a day, depending on what the season of the year is and what the stockpiles are. So you build up your strategic petroleum reserve so that you could survive an interruption of supply. The Saudis are investing in producing an additional 4 million barrels a day over the next 3 or 4 years. So they're going to increase their production capacity by the sum total of everything Iran can produce. So they're working to preclude Iran's ability to threaten us. The Saudis have already tried to drive down the price of oil to $44 a barrel. They tried that in December and failed, and because of Chinese demand. Now, if you get past the sort of near-term supply interruption problem, then you're into a longer-term program. So what do you have to do? First thing is energy conservation. Second thing is to start replacing the consumption of fossil fuels by other renewable fuels. And I happen to believe that global warming is a significant issue. So I wouldn't be happy with energy independence if all we did was build a bunch of coal-fired power plants around the country. That's a very poor substitute. So we have to also shift away from carbon fuels. So what I'd see is the second step is you'd raise CAFE standards, mileage standards. You would put in your tax expenditures and your government R&D. You'd be encouraging renewable energy. You'd look for some measurable goal and work it backwards and make sure you could get to that goal. When I was running, I said 20% renewable by 2020. I think that's a reasonable standard still. We've lost a couple of years in the meantime and done nothing, but there's a lot of solar technology. It is getting better. It's still expensive. You do have offshore technologies for taking energy out of waves. You can put wind in. I know people don't like windmills. They look unsightly. North Dakota's volunteered to cover the whole state with windmills. If you have any issue with that, they said consider us the Saudi Arabia of wind. So there are lots of things we can do if we have the political will to do it. It's very hard in Washington to muster that political will because it is about money, and money speaks on the Hill. So this is a case where people like you and Katrina, especially if Katrina becomes our next senator, you know, you're going to have to be really powerful in terms of helping keep America's focus on this. We lost our focus in the 70s, as you know, and we still don't have it right. So
I just have to add in there, in a state that's 83% forested, we would like to put a little investment into the potential for wood as both an ethanol substitute instead of raising the price of corn, but also for potentials with climate change and the potential investment of saving land as well as producing biomass and alternative fuels. So add it into your speech.
I think it's a great idea. Cellulosic ethanol.
Exactly. You got
That's
it.
what we're looking for.
And we need lots of investment to make it happen.
And we need more trees.
And we need it in Maine and New Hampshire.
And tell Carol when you report on the...
Carol needs to remember that. Yes.
Cellulosic
She does.
ethanol. The key is you have to be able to have the enzymes that break it down so it's not just corn.
Right. We need something besides
I'm on the board of an oil refinery, and because I think you have to understand, you can't pass these laws and understand things and talk about it if you don't know anything about it. So I've learned a lot about energy working on this little oil refinery board, and we have a fertilizer company that's associated with us. We bring in, we make, well, we use coke that comes out of the oil, and then we make fertilizer out of it. And the price of fertilizer is going through the roof right now, simply because of ethanol. Because you've got to have fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer, to grow corn. And so, bang, it's going up. And it further complicates the price equation in terms of getting people away from gasoline. So, we got a lot of work to do, but I thank you for bringing that up. It's important.
And I thank you all for coming. Oh, there are more questions.
There are more.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to ask him one about hydrogen. What do you think about getting into the hydrogen economy? Well, from what I've read, the main problem is storage. And the main problem with solar is the sun goes down at night. But if you have solar and you're producing hydrogen with it, and you can solve the storage problem. I guess right now they're talking about carbon nanotubes, which are a real good possibility. But, you know, if we spend money on this.
I don't totally dismiss hydrogen, but I've seen it as a ploy on the part of the automobile industry to say that, you know, the good is the enemy of the best. The best is hydrogen because supposedly if you burn it all you get water out of it and energy. But in fact, it's got so many problems, it's so far out there that what we need is progress now.
But aren't they,
So-
there's a hydrogen refueling station in Reykjavik, and they're running hydrogen buses and cars all over that place. I know they have geothermal power.
You get hydrogen from natural gas, and natural gas has carbons in it, so you have to have carbon sequestration. And you have to look at the whole hydrogen fuel cycle to make sure you're really efficient. It's true. If you took seawater and you took solar energy and used that for electrolysis to break down the seawater, you could. But that is cost prohibitive right now. And there's various technologies. I've seen Russian technologies that say you break it down and get the hydrogen by spinning the seawater at very high-speed centrifuges. And there's a lot of gimmicks out there. We're a long way away on hydrogen. I think it's fine to work on it, but the near term is we need to replace, we should not use hydrocarbons for stationary power. So in fixed power plants, you should not be emitting carbons. If you can do carbon sequestration and cold gasification and save all the carbon, fine, be my guest. But nobody's quite figured out how to do it in practice, because to put the CO2 back in the ground, you have to have a certain geologic formation. So that's a problem. I like wind and solar for fixed power generation. And I like to see it distributed in terms of people encouraged to have solar panels on their homes, and then use reservoirs and other things to store up the electricity during the day and then draw it down at night. But, you know, hydrogen will be there one of these days probably. But if we wait for it, it's too late.
But we got to start sometime.
Yeah, but we've started. We're putting $1 billion a year into hydrogen. If we were putting that much into solar, you'd already see a change in our oil consumption. I mean, it's a crime to burn heavy oil in power generation in a furnace to heat water to make a turbine to drive it for electricity. And we're doing it for natural gas, which is the same thing. The only thing about gas is it has less carbon content. But why use a non-renewable resource and just send it up the smokestack? Why not really focus on the renewables for that? It's different with airplanes because you can't get anything that's as powerful as a liter of petroleum that has the same specific energy in it. But that's the last place. But for fixed power generation, shouldn't be using any carbon on that, be my view.
Can I ask you, will
Website.
you stick around for a few
Yeah.
minutes? Can we ask?
Because we're
General
holding
Clark to take
everybody
a
else
break.
out. We thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting us.